Welcome to Sector Report. I'm David Beatson, and this week, what happens now the government signed off the Crayfer farm sale to Shanghai Pengjin? Wool's back in fashion, so what's making the wool market wobble, with auction prices dropping every week over the last month? And life on the line in Moerewa, the town divided by the long-running AFFCO meat workers union dispute.
We can do units and numbers and productivity, but in the end you're talking about people, real people that are actually being hurt by all of this.
Well, Moerewa is a small town in Northland known mainly for its meatworks, but for weeks now, the works have been in a tit-for-tat exchange of lockouts by the company, strikes by the meatworkers union, and frequent forays by both to the employment court. The AFFCO dispute is being played out in 10 locations across the North Island, but the divisions it's causing don't run much deeper anywhere else, because in Moerewa, the dispute is also causing divisions within and between the families of a small community, as our rural correspondent Drew Chappell discovered.
In the wee small hours before dawn, while most of the country sleeps, there are some who are fighting for their lives.
It's 4:30 in the morning, we've just turned up here at the picket line and there's a few people, but things are going to start picking up once guys start coming into work.
I'm in Moerewa, an hour north of Whangarei, on the picket lines outside the town's biggest employer, the AFFCO Meatworks. More than 100 of the Freezing Works employees are themselves being frozen out by AFFCO and their majority shareholder, the Tallies Group. And after nearly 2 months on the outside, tempers are starting to fray.
The patience wears a bit thin, so the boys might say a few things that they wouldn't normally say. But that's to be expected after 7 weeks out, watching people go in and taking what we call our jobs.
And Moerewa's struggle isn't unique. The situation is nationwide, a result of a breakdown in mediation talks between AFFCO management and the Meatworkers Union. As a result, more than 1,400 unionised workers from AFFCO's 9 plants have been out of work for the last 2 months. For families here, that's 2 months' worth of paychecks they can't afford to go without.
We work with the food bank and they do a good job, and it's every day, every working day we're there. No one wants to ask for things, yeah. It's not something you would wish on anyone, really.
Laurie Nankiville is one of those locked out. He's the local union rep and has given the last 35 years of his working life to the Moerewa plant. He and his wife have a large family. They've raised 8 children in the town. He still heads out to the meatworks each day, but now he's at the centre of the picket, standing firm with his friends and colleagues.
We had a march last Friday and it's the biggest turnout I've ever seen of local people supporting the union and the workers down there, because it's not helping the community. So they are thinking, well, let's try and get this thing resolved and get back to normal lives.
Paul Owen, another veteran of more than 30 years, isn't just struggling with the lockout, he's struggling to come to grips with how this dispute is poisoning personal relationships. One of his best friends and neighbours has rejected the union's stance and still has a job inside the plant. That's tough to take for Paul.
We've been told for a number of years now how good this plant has been with regards to yields and compliance and all those sort of things that involve with the works, and unfortunately that means nothing, and loyalty means nothing. We've got best friends that are in there, and it's really made it real tense at the moment, and that's the sad part. These fellas, our employers, Tallies, they have no regard to that, they don't care.
AFFCO and the union have been at loggerheads since December, when the collective agreement covering the workforce expired. Talks over a new agreement have stalled over what MWU National Secretary Dave Eastlake says are AFFCO's anti-union demands.
We have these similar agreements with every other meat company in New Zealand. They operate without any problem. They're agreements that are altered on a day-to-day basis to suit how many people at work, for instance, or what's required on that day. They're not big deals, and so I think what AFFCO are really saying is they don't want unionised workers in their workplace.
Conditions around the duration of contracts are proving the major sticking point for AFFCO.
How can you let us down? Same with you, Elena. When you were crying up in the office, who was up there defending your job? You came and got me.
AFFCO wants greater flexibility around when they need workers and for what length of time.
We say you can have all the flexibility you want, but they want flexibility without an agreement with the union. They want to be able to call the shots from day to day, from hour to hour, and without anyone having any input or any say in it. And that could not only affect the health and safety of workers, it could also badly affect the earnings of workers and the speeds they have to work with.
One of the union's major concerns is safety, ensuring the pace of the line and the hours worked don't become too much for employees whose work is naturally hazardous.
They're pushing up chain speeds, so they're putting more through with less brakes. I mean, we constantly get RSI injuries. I myself now have supposedly carpal tunnel or a neuroma even growing in my hand.
At just 22 years old, Stephen James is facing the prospect of surgery on both of his hands after just 5 years at the plant, something most workers accept as a hazard of the job. The lockout, however, has made his situation even worse.
I'm on sedatives so I can sleep just because they ache at night constantly. Nurofen, chewing those back like candy. I can't get in to fill out ACC forms. I mean, the doctor's in there every Tuesday. I can't go past that yellow line.
Despite this and the fact that he could be inside working on an independent contract, he's standing strong with the union and his workmates.
People out here who, the unions help them, back them up. Even most of the IEAs in there have needed the union at some point. It's definitely worth backing them. I mean, I can sleep easy at night knowing that I'm helping my friends. I grew up with all these guys.
But there are many who haven't been sleeping easily in the past 8 weeks.
At least probably close to 50% of the community, work there or have connections. And then when you think of the kids that go to school here, all the infrastructure of this community is affected by what's happening. I don't know how long our community can sustain this.
As for those keeping the plant going, while more than 1,000 years combined experience stood at the roadside,
They are young. Most of the workforce in there is very young, and it's people we know or we know their parents, grandparents. They don't understand, and the company is making it hard for them to understand by not letting them have any or no contact with us at all.
So we tried to speak to management inside the plant about the lockout and about how work is proceeding with the younger, less experienced workforce. I was allowed inside to meet the plant manager, but that was as far as things went.
I was just wondering, would you be happy to have a real quick chat with us just about some...
All of it has to go through the head office, guys, so how things are, I suppose.
It seemed the media were locked out too. So we called head office at AFFCO to ask about the mediation at the meatworks.
The union has the view that consultation means agreement, but consultation is clearly defined in the Employment Relations Act, and it doesn't necessarily mean agreement, but it means that we have to listen to the issues as raised by the employees directly affected and figure how we can ameliorate those to the extent that's possible.
The company claims more than half of all AFFCO meat workers have now signed independent contracts, and that, they say, has riled union members. The union, of course, sees things differently.
The company have said, you're out, you're not coming back until we're ready to have you back. We don't want to talk to you. We will see you in the court because that's where they have to go, and there's really very little more than we can do at the present moment.
With AFFCO pulling out of the latest mediation talks and the case before the courts, there appears to be no end in sight for the dispute. So the families in Moerewa will continue to do what they've always done and stick together.
Drew Chappell reporting. Coming up, what's got the wool market wobbling and what needs to happen to pull prices out of their downward drift. Welcome back to Sector Report. Well, a lot of fingers were crossed as sheep farmers waited to see what happened at the South Island wool auction last Friday. Over the last month, Wool prices have been in steady decline. The country's biggest wool exporter, Wool Services International, says there's an unseasonably large amount of wool on the market at the moment, and it's advising brokers and merchants to even out the flow to auction. But what's really making the wool market wobble? To get some insight into the market, we're joined by the Managing Director of Elders New Zealand, Stuart Chapman. Stuart, thanks for joining us. At the beginning of this year, it looked like things were getting off to a bright start. We had these headlines, wool's back in fashion. What's been going wrong over the last 4 weeks?
Well, I guess the major impact has been through demand. There are other factors, mainly manufacturers having problems selling their end product, which is causing a glitch in the supply chain back here.
At this point, how far through the selling season are we?
Well, we've sold about 75% of our projected auction wool for this season.
Really?
So
we're well through.
Yeah, that's been sold strongly, and very little passing. So yeah, you're right. It's been strong, and demand's been good till now.
Okay. Well, then all of a sudden you've had a shift.
That's right. And
what do you put that down to?
Well, there's currency always is an issue, although we've been living with that for some time now.
Well, I was going to say, it's not new.
No, it's not new at all. And if you have a look at the currencies we trade wool in, like say your US, Euro and Sterling, they've all been strong. But of course, the demand from mills has weakened just during the last 6 or 8 weeks.
This is the domestic demand?
No, both internationally and domestic.
Well. Okay.
But the big factor has been the Australasian mills not being in the market currently, and they are generally good buyers of second share wool, which is starting to come through the system.
Are they sitting on stocks? Is there a hangover from say, the previous season's clip?
No. Most of the stock was cleared, as we said. Strong demand earlier on in the year, strong demand last year.
I just thought that might just sit in the mill and not go anywhere.
No, there was some filling of the pipelines over the last 18 months because it had been dragged quite clean due to the GFC, but there's not a lot of stock sitting around. There is, apparently, according to manufacturers, quite a lot of finished product sitting around, and that's the problem.
Are the buyers from all the markets being cautioned? You mentioned the Australasian mills sort of stocked up, not moving their stock. What about elsewhere? A lot of interest from Asia in our wool.
Well, China, if China had been in the market in recent months, this had been a lot worse. They've been purchasing up around 45% of our exported wool, which is significant. Mm-hmm. And I guess free trade agreements had a big impact on that. And China's been a great buyer. But we've seen a weakening in that area just in the last 2 or 3 weeks as well, a real softening for demand out of China.
Okay, so there. What about UK, Europe?
Well, Europe's been difficult for the last 3 years. A lot of mills have closed down over there, and as everybody knows, there's still major issues in Europe around funding, and the local domestic market is not strong. The States is starting to turn. We're seeing some positive vibes out of the States. Some of the numbers we've seen in terms of the flooring market has seen some positive growth. But we need more demand-driven strategies around wool, like the Elders Primary Wool's just shorn. Mm-hmm. There's the campaigner wool. It's a real re-education of the consumer to understand the attributes of wool.
We had that headline, wool's back in fashion. But is fashion really a driver of wool?
Well, it's demand. And fashion comes to play when it's in a finished product. Mm-hmm. So woolen carpets is fashionable.
Get to that. Yeah. What is the real core driver of it in terms of end product?
Well, obviously
consumer product.
Obviously,
sold.
quality.
Yeah.
Price. Yeah. And design, colouring. And if you look at the high end, where we need to be stronger in, and that's what the whole Just Shorn program's about, is selling high end carpet to more affluent consumers. Then they actually change their carpet about every 7 or 8 years, and that's due to fashion. Mm-hmm. It's not due to the carpet has run its expiry date or anything like that.
Okay. Now, Wool Services International at the moment is telling brokers and merchants to even out the flow of wool that's left to allow the market to stabilise. What does that actually mean? Is that hold back and wait for the prices?
Maybe that's a question for Wool Services. But
Pardon?
Maybe that's a question for Wool Services. But at the end of the day, we do get a strong supply of wool during the summer, early autumn period. So that January, February, March, there is a lot of wool around.
At the moment, I mean, in the last sale, we saw 55% of the offering actually cleared by sale, which means that 45% of it was held back. I mean, the farmers holding back really because of price. They think there's a prospect there'll be a bigger price. And are they doing the right thing?
Well, I guess that's up to the individual. I mean, different farmers have different financial...
You're an industry leader, I'm asking you.
Financial circumstances. We're finding it a little difficult to get a gauge on just where this is going to sit in the next 2 or 3 months. We don't see there going to be a huge price lift over the next immediate future. I mean, we always encourage farmers that they should meet the market, and most farmers do. Particularly, pricing. If you look at average pricing now, for $4.30, it's still not too bad. It's a lot better than what it was 2 years ago.
Do you think we'll clear the season's clip, or we'll have a stockpile?
There won't be a big stockpile, as I say. A lot of the clips gone. There's still second share to come. And that is not huge volumes. So yeah, there'll be some product that will continue to sell readily, but there will be some product that farmers will sit on. I know we're, as a company, are sitting on a lot more wool on hold as opposed to this time last year.
Stuart Chapman, thanks very much. Stuart Chapman, Managing Director of Elders New Zealand. In just a moment, what's the Crayfar Farm decision going to mean for foreign investment on and off the farm? That's next on Sector Report. Well, the Crayfar Farm decision is out. The sale to Shanghai Pengjin has the government seal of approval, but there's still the prospect of more court action and a protest hekoi in the pipeline. On top of that, the sale approval included a statement that government officials are now working on a detailed policy framework to assist in targeting, attracting and utilising foreign direct investment. So, has the floodgate been opened, or is it going to be tougher and tighter for foreign investors interested in purchasing key New Zealand assets, like farmland, from now on? Well, that's what we're going to explore with our next guest, Editor of the National Business Review, Neville Gibson. Welcome, Neville. Okay, is this likely to open the floodgates for more foreign purchases?
Far from it, David. I think this decision is so gold-plated, it puts the bar far too high. We're talking mainly farmland here, but I think in general terms, people looking at New Zealand over the past few years since the Auckland Airport decision, which again was done by a previous government, that we've had very little inflow of foreign investment into New Zealand. In fact, no greenfields development that I can think of at all.
Okay. I mean, just how much more stringent are the conditions that have finally been determined for this purchase than they were in the original decision that was taken to appeal?
Well, when it went to the court, Justice Miller put a lot of conditions on his judgment and looking at the Act, which became quite tortuous. I think even legal experts had difficulty sorting it all out. And
obviously.
And then the Chinese had to come back, and they sort of basically reiterated a lot of the sweeteners they put into it, and these then became the condition on which the farmers are going to be run. So you've got 16 farms. I'll probably sell off maybe a couple to keep iwi quiet, but they have to spend well over $18 million in over 5 years on improvements, all this sort of thing, which is going to create a big problem for other farmers.
Okay, but I mean, to some extent, Michael Fay is saying, well, any farmer would do that. But I mean, you're saying 18 million is far more than the average farmer would do.
Well, I think 18 million would be a lot for a farmer to invest in property.
Well, it's a lot of property.
And they're going to have luxurious housing. Apparently, some people think that these houses are going to be better than most dairy farmers. Where the funding, of course, we won't really know the details of that, but it won't be at Westpac rates. We know the Crayford farms were sold in the first place because they were badly managed and heavily leveraged. And I think every dairy farmer in New Zealand should be quite worried by this decision because that's a whole new ball game, I think.
Now, there have been claims from the Greens that the Chinese government heavied our government about this purchase to approve it. Do you see grounds for that?
Well, it depends what you mean by heavy. There were certainly some. I mean, you don't deal with governments like Chinese, but it's not exactly an equal game, is it? And there was a free trade agreement.
So when they say they're very interested, you better take that very seriously.
I think you've got to look at the wider picture. There's a huge fish to fry. China is going to be the main source of world capital over the next few years, and we're actually at the leading edge of that. We're small, but we're in areas that really they're desperate to get what we have, which is good food security and safe food. They can't do that anywhere else in the world that I know of.
Can I just come back on this question of the conditions attaching to the sale? I mean, has the purchaser actually upped the ante between Prop 1 and Prop 2? Or are they just saying, oh, we'll accept it because a condition, what we said we were going to do in the first place?
That's right. I think they had a pretty sweet deal first time up, but there were some legal hooks there where the Act sort of says, it's quite complicated sort of thing. But now that they said, no, we'll set this in concrete, there's huge expenditure there. But I think the deal that went ahead because of the involvement of Landcorp, and of course that's about as safe as you can get. I mean, no one worries about whether Landcorp makes a profit. It's got huge resources and it's owned by the government, so everyone should feel quite happy about that one.
Michael Fay says he's still got a live appeal in train. Here we are talking about some action against Landcorp. Is it likely that we'll see any action which will impede Shanghai Pingshan?
Well, I haven't actually seen why Sir Michael has become involved in this. He's never shown any interest in the dairy industry before.
He owns one.
Does he?
Not an industry, a farm.
Oh, farm.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but a lot of that is for lifestyle or that sort of thing, yeah. But he hasn't shown any interest in the dairy industry, shall we say. I think he saw an opportunity here that this was one way to get in, but to do it at a much lower cost.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, do you think this appeal's got legs?
Oh, no, I don't. I think the judge's decisions were quite technical. I think the government will actually go back and it has to go and review the Act and make it less onerous.
However, there's one area I'd like to get your opinion on because it affects broader business. The OIO decision actually says government officials are currently working on a detailed policy framework to assist in targeting, attracting and utilising foreign direct investment. What's likely to come of that?
Well, I think they're dreaming there because it's not the way we should be handling it. I mean, the more government intervention there is, the less likely overseas investors are going to come in. Otherwise, they're going to be coming in on a kind of government guarantee, and that will be probably done at government-to-government type level. Qataris and others in the Gulf are very interested in food security, but they're not going to go in using the private sector. They're going to be making a deal with the government.
What you were saying right at the outset essentially was that there's not much interest out there. Well, if the government wants to attract it, could it not be that this review process actually liberalises rather than makes it more difficult?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of interest in food security around the world, but they're picking off the easy stuff, which is in Africa and that, where there's much more land and it's undeveloped. New Zealand is not undeveloped. Brazil is undeveloped, for example. But we've got the expertise in dairy industry. We've got the high quality, high tech sort of approach to agriculture, and that's what people are interested in. But I still think the bar has been set very high. It'll probably take 4 or 5 years before people sort of see how this Chinese experiment works.
Okay, very quickly. The polls don't seem to indicate anything's happening to the government, but are they burning political capital on this issue?
Well, I've always argued that a lot of these media debates are well overdone and that the public really voted National in and they want them to stay in power at the last election in order to sort out the economy and get borrowing down. And it isn't, and they can see, a lot of people can see this isn't happening because the government has decided keep welfare spending up, and it hasn't got the economy cooking up either. So I think people are still hanging on there that National will come right at some stage. And a lot of this is palaver, it's a lot of noise, and it's mainly interesting people around the beehive. But it doesn't affect, let's face it, this decision does not affect anyone's life whatsoever.
Neville Gibson, thank you very much. Neville Gibson, editor of the National Business Review. And that's all for this week. Next week, Sector Report's rural correspondent Drew Chappell will be reporting on one of the tough tasks for farming families, succession planning. Meantime, remember you can check out this program anytime online at country99tv.co.nz. Thanks for your company. I'm David Beatson for Sector Report. See you next week.